You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com, and Henry the FLOWMASTER Schwartz from CBOE. The Option Block is brought to you by CBOE. CBOE's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of CBOE Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively CBOE. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the CBOE products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means it is Thursday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's cooking in these crazy markets? Well, let's find out together, shall we? It is time for the Option Block, what the cool kids call the old OB. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you are mainlining and binging these days. Remember, like what you hear this, anything else on the network, like, a star, a comment, a rating, review, all that does help. At the end of the day, new people continue to discover the content. And if you too want a shot of extra content in your lives, you want access to the exclusive Pro podcast feed, couple of exclusive shows coming at you every week, great guests, awesome oddities, awesome giveaways, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. As we go around the horn, see who's joining us on Ye Old OB program today. First, let's go out to the far reaches of CBOE East, where we are joined once again. Missed him last week, but now he's back in action. He is the FLOWMASTER, a.k.a. Mr. Henry Schwartz from the aforementioned CBOE. Mr. FLOWMASTER, welcome back to the show, sir.
Howdy, Mark, and everybody. I'm glad to be back. Sorry I had to do a last-second cancel last week. I ended up having some important meeting about order flow analysis, so I had to bail out. But I'm back, and we got plenty of exciting action to talk about this week, so happy to be here.
Happy to have you back, and then dialing that needle up a little bit, up to the shores of Maine, where things are dark and stormy, but luckily, he still has power, he still has internet. so we can be joined once again by the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. Mr. G, welcome back to the show. How are things on the dark and stormy shores?
Still without heat. Into March. So we're working on 3 months now.
Who needs heat in Maine from January through March? Why would you need it then?
Nobody. So if you want to hurl invective and umbrage at somebody, it is the company York that makes our furnace.
Oh,
so we have our part is under warranty, and so that part is free. But of course, I'm going to be dead before I actually get it. But they're happy to replace our furnace for us for a mere, $20,000. So
how generous
do I
of them.
sit and die of frostbite on the free part, or do I pay them the $20,000 so I can stay warm? I will suffer.
They'll come fix it in August when you say, hey, can you fix my AC while you're at it? Because it's 100 degrees. But yeah, in January through March, no, they're happy to let you twist because they know January through March, that's when you're going to cough up the $20K, right? Not in August.
But they do not know what they have run into.
No, they have not contested with the Rock Lobster before. Stubborn is his middle name as we keep on rolling. Right on down to the hinterlands of Chicago, known as St. Charles, where it's always warm and sunny and tropical because they have that great weather shield, where we are joined once again by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the show, sir. Uncle Mike, are you there, sir? What happened?
Sorry, you just cut out. Can you guys hear me?
Dude,
Yeah,
he's working the vacuum cleaner in the car wash right now.
He sounds like he's in a hurricane.
Welding when you join the podcast.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Well, I have a fully functioning furnace, so I'm kind of excited about that. But man, you don't want to mess with the Rock Lobster. If the man's willing to go through winter without a furnace in Maine, I am not messing with him.
Nope. He will prove a point. Even if his entire family freezes, he will be victorious at the end of the day. Will we all be victorious at the end of the show? I guess it's time to find out. It's time for the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, let's get to it. A little bit of the old block of trading. And, Powell coming back in action this week. Couple of chats with Congress this week. A lot of people waiting on pins and needles, as they want to do these days whenever the Fed is talking, to see what's going on. Glean some insight into future rate hikes or cuts. Seems like Powell giving people mostly what they want to hear because the markets at the end of the last couple of sessions, mostly up pretty firmly again today, almost a full percent, almost exactly 50 handles. Trading right around a little bit north of 51.5 right now. So feeling their oats. The NASDAQ up about 1.5%. The Dow, the newly christened Dow with ye old Amazon, not looking so sexy, only up about 1/3 of a point out there right now. And then, of course, our old friend small caps up about the same percent as the S&P, up almost a full percent out there right now. And all that actually showing us that vol has remained stubbornly firm this week. Of course, we had a little bit of a spook earlier this week with a little bit of red on the screen. S&P selling off somewhere in the ballpark of 1%. So that popped vol a little bit. And we've remained pretty much firm ever since. VIX, when we kicked off the show, at about a 1440, puts it up a full point from the Monday show. VVIX at an 82, up about 3 points. Remember, we were just saying on vol views when VVIX starts dipping down to close to 75, you got to pay attention because it usually doesn't hang out there for very long. And back up to low 80s right now. Will we stay here? Will we drift back down? Will we pop further north? I guess that's to be seen. VXX at about a 14, even up about half a point. UVXY 710, up about 1/3 of a point. SVIX at a 40 even, down about 1.25, and UVIX at about 10 1/3, down a little over half a point from our show this time last week. All right, a lot to unpack. Let's go around the horn the way we came. Let's start in the land of CBOE East. Mr. FLOWMASTER, a lot going on. Another Powell and Fed-driven week. What's been catching your eye out there, sir?
Yesterday there was some excitement late in the day. I was reading a paper by a quant out of Dresden on the VIX 1 day, which specifically looks at the VIX, which is created through the 0-day and 1 day SPX options, and was going to. He basically points out that what you really want to do to make sense of kind of event risk is to look at the same time of day versus the prior day, whether you're doing this in the VIX 1D or even just the SPX straddle price. And yesterday was one of those days where, basically you didn't see a lot of decay in the morning because everybody was waiting for something. And, we definitely got a little whipsaw later on. We'd been up pretty strong and sold off and then kind of recovered a little bit. So that was interesting. Then we also had some fireworks with NYCB we can talk about later. But it's we're near all-time highs in a lot of names. We're seeing some meme stock behavior, obviously, in things like MSTR and NVIDIA. There's kind of lots of that going on, and then we still have earnings coming through too. So it's a nice kind of smorgasbord of market activity, I'd say.
I know your colleague, Miss Mandy Zhu, putting out an interesting piece about realized SKEW in the SPX out there being at some near record levels, sir. Anything catching your eye out there?
I mean, we continue to look at SKEW. In fact, we were just kind of talking. I had a really interesting conversation with her a couple of days ago because everybody talks about SKEW and you can kind of picture it in your head. It's like how steep is that smile, or how expensive are the puts versus calls? But there's kind of some nuances to how you really calculate it that mean that most estimates of the most ways to talk about it are a little bit tricky, right? If you just do put minus the call vol, then it's a very different story when at the money's 12 versus at the money's 60, right? So that's not quite good. And if you divide it by spot and you consider that like a good way to normalize things, that has some funny impact in, like, let's say SKEW doesn't really change, but volatility just goes up a point. That's going to actually your divisor's going up, so the SKEW is going to look like it went down, except that the relationship between the put and call didn't change. So it's a really interesting time, and I love to try to look at it, as intricately as you can. Let's talk about you can talk about the SKEW between the 80% put and the 90% put, and just focus on that. So there's just a lot to dig into with that stuff, and but in general, yes, the SKEW has been very flat for a while. It's a surprisingly bullish sentiment that you get out of that, unless you take the contrarian view and say there's a lot of complacency and then we're in a dangerous period. So just a lot to kind of dig through when you're trying to, make your own decisions.
She puts out a lot of good stuff on that macro volatility digest. I know we receive it. Is it open and available to the public as well? Can they just go sign up for that email?
Yes. That her weekly piece comes out on Mondays. I believe probably the best way is just Google CBOE Mandy Zhu, and you should find a link to it, because I don't know. I'll put it into the chat. You can put it with the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a read, listeners. If you're intrigued by all these things, and you're one of the many who was asking us recently, are we looking at 2021 meme stock SKEW levels again? If you're intrigued by all things SKEW, Mandy does crunch the numbers on that from a broad macro vol perspective, which is always fascinating. So if you want to read some of that in between checking out these shows, then by all means, I certainly recommend it as we keep on rolling out to the land of no furnace, aka the shores of Maine. Luckily, things are getting a little bit balmier up there, I think, so I do believe they will survive the winter. Mr. Rock Lobster, in addition to your boiling anger over the furnace, see what I did there? What else is catching your eye out there, sir?
I like Henry's his SKEWulator talk. Lot of ways to look at volatility. So back in my youth in the SPX pit, everything kind of was measured by where the at the money was, and you got the at the money vol, and then like you had a downside curve deviated from that. You had slope of that, you had slope of upside curve, and then you had from there how everything moved. Like, okay, do you have kind of like a sticky vol situation? I think Derman, or what's one of the other good vol riders? Dang, I can't remember his name at this point, but they coined some names for sticky vol or sticky delta. If you traded in the SPX, you know exactly what those felt like, because SPX would go straight up and your puts would not drop in value. So I would call those like a sticky delta, because the vol would explode on the strike. You're like, oh, wow, SPX is up 3 handles. Back then, 3 handles was a big move. And And my puts are not moving. They are still the same price. So anybody that has traded SPX as a market maker knows, okay, you sell a bunch of puts and you hedge with futures. So your future delta is still 100 or 500 in the SPX back then. And your puts are not going anywhere. So when the market rallies, you are getting annihilated unless you own a buttload of calls. So there is a lot of nuance to SKEW. And as Henry rightly points out, there's different ways to measure it. We do a ton of it in Option Pit. A lot of my index trading is based on SKEW and forward vol because that's when retail could get a good entry price, which I am a retail trader now. So from that point of view, I wrote something today, tweeted it out. Volatility on the 5,200 strike is up on the day in SPX for the 30-day option. So for any of you trading at home, if you are option sellers and you're like, why do these options not go down? Because when you're trading an index or you're trading a product, the market prices known things pretty well, very well normally. But when you have something that is basically just going in one direction forever, the way the market prices that or adjusts is they just jack the vol up as high as they can get away with. And that's, I think, what we're seeing right now. So all the people on FinTwit and all this, that all these blah, 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 blah experts, whatever. Now, there are some that are very good, like Chris Sedile and guys like that, who know what the heck's going on. And that's what they say. Hey, you can have vol on the upside. You can have upside vol because we have a continuing path in one direction. So even though realized vol looks very low, it actually, if you're trading, it kind of feels high because you keep running out through all your strikes. So, and I think that's where we are right now. So, in my view here, you have VIX is down 19 cents again, just because we're moving up the vol curve, but like vol at VIX can stay at a 14.5 and we could be trading 5,200 by the close on Friday. My guess by then VIX would probably be higher. Just kind of seeing what the demand for calls, because it is insatiable at this point. It's also, people forgot about the bull market in 2023. I think a lot of people didn't, but I think a good part of the population hasn't. Now they realize that, oh, wow, we're at 5,100. And calls, if they're learning about calls like last week, they're going to buy them because buying a call in NVIDIA is cheaper than spending 900, 850 or 925, whatever the stock is. So, we've seen this many times, Mr. Longo, in your youth and in my youth, right? Endless call buying when people think stocks are going up. So vol going up is not always bearish. It is also a sign of like a parabolic market going up. So I would just caution everybody, if you think you're kind of a smarty pants and you got away with selling a lot of options, iron condors and stuff like that over the last year maybe, because you did have some up and down. The one-way market is very tough. And, you could also see your vol products like UVIX, UV, all those get kind of locked up because they're not capturing they're just capturing a little bit of the future decay. But even now, the futures are relatively flat for this part of the 30-day cycle going into March. So it is a wild and woolly atmosphere that I do not see changing anytime soon. So that's what we got. So if they're buying it, it's going to go up. And I think that's kind of where we find ourselves right now, regardless of, Greenspan or not Greenspan. Boy, I date myself. Powell at the same time is just, okay, we're kind of keeping the status quo. Rates aren't going down and nobody cares. So if he's saying rates aren't going down and nobody cares, that means we're going higher because the interest rate thing, at least in the short term, is out of the picture, which gets us to a June rate cut. So there's a lot of headway between now and June. Let's put it that way. So that's my take on SKEW and SPY, SPX, and all that stuff.
When you say a wild and woolly environment, there could be no other place you're referring to than the mad land known as St. Charles. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, was catching your eye in a mostly, except for the beginning, Uncle Mike type of week.
Well, I mean, first off, never before in the history of the entire stock market has there ever been a better time to sell than today. We got new all-time highs on the S&P 500, and to keep my compliance people happy, I'm not saying that it is the time to sell, but I'm just saying that mathematically, there's never been a better time to sell. That is an undeniable fact, and it's exciting whenever that happens. And I know with all this talk about SKEW, it reminds me of that Johnny Cash song from back in the day, The Boy Named SKEW. Isn't that what he was talking about?
He was ahead of
exactly.
He was ahead of his time, that Johnny Cash. Very into financial mathematics. No one knew that about him.
Very much so. I mean, that song came out even before the CBOE was out there, before there was listed options, because him and June Carter they were trading covered calls with each other, I hear. So that's what a lot of their songs were about, from my understanding.
Little known fact: Johnny Cash, the first seat holder on the CBOE.
Really? Wow, that's interesting.
Fascinating.
And so then maybe what Andrew can do now if he wants to be like the angry non-furnace guy from Maine, he can walk in and say, "My name is SKEW. How do you do?"
Yes. That's exactly what he should do.
Yes. So anyway, with this, in terms of what the market's what's happening today, the main thing that I'm seeing that's just really fascinating is all this green on the screen, and there's no Apple. I mean, this is just boggling my mind all over the place, and that the market is allowed to go higher and Apple is not. And on top of that, if you just look at the XLK sector, that's up 1.5%. That's technology, the technology ETF. That's up 1.5% on the day. So why on earth is that happening? Well, if you go down the list of various tech stocks, of course, you have Amazon up over 2%. You have Google up 2.5%. You have Microsoft up 1.5%. Netflix is up over 1.5%. And there's NVIDIA. That's up 3.7% on the day. So we are getting a lot of movement in the tech sector, but no Apple. So that's something that is very peculiar, even with them being, the $3 trillion mark that they had staring in the face, that they still haven't, that they don't seem to be able to get through. They still do have that. So a lot of other tech names that are really pushing. Qualcomm, that's up over 5% on the day. So we have a lot of tech movement, but we do not have Apple joining the party, which is very interesting. Now, with that being said, we do have all-time highs in the S&P 500. We have a 50-point day. That's always an exciting thing in the S&P, to say the least. The other thing that's exciting, we're getting some movement in silver again. So silver is actually, it's past the 22 mark on, I'm looking at SLV, the ETF. So we are getting a little bit of movement on the shiny stuff. Bonds are relatively, how do I put this, boring on the day-to-day, and that just looking at the 10-year and corporates, we're not really getting a lot of movement in the bond space. But right now, the fact that we are getting this much movement, and it's not based on Powell saying, hey, we're giving away the farm, we're going to cut rates 4% over the course of the next year. That's kind of, I'm kind of in a bullish state of mind from that, not going to lie. So that's what I'm seeing right now.
All right, let's see what we're seeing out there in ye old markets today. Listeners, let's start in the broad indices. And you know what? Our old friend VIX seems to like a little bit of Powell action, or maybe likes a protracted upside and firming up a vol, or maybe they like the SKEW we're talking about. Something, they like something out there in VIX, because it's actually putting up a little bit of paper out there today. 425,000 contracts on the tape. That's certainly not nothing, especially what we've seen out there in VIX land lately, where some days this time of the show, it's $150, maybe 200 if we're lucky. So looking pretty active. 714,000 is the ADV out there right now. If you're wondering what's driving the tape out there in VIX today, it's not our 1x5 friend. That's my first guess whenever I see a decent volume day. Yesterday it was the 1x5. Today, not so much. It is 57,000 of the 13.5 puts expiring on the monthlies, and then just a regular monthly 13.5 puts. Looks like paper might be dumping some of those. I'll have to go look and see. They're trading kind of all over the place. And then we got 51,000 of the April 50. So back to the upside, but worth noting there is some OI on that strike as well. So they could be bailing on the April 50s. Either way, that's what's leading the dance. That's 108,000 contracts right there. So that's probably helping to contribute some of that froth out there in VIX land. Speaking of froth, SPY is saying, man, hold my beer, everybody else. I'm off to the races. 5.1 million contracts already in SPY. So SPY usually likes a nice whipsaw. Today, SPY likes itself a little bit of upside action out there in the markets today, listeners, with a 5.1 million contracts on the tape for SPY. The ADV is right around 8.5. So yeah, spoiler alert, they're probably going to hit that. The S also feeling its oats today. Nearly 2 million contracts on the tape already. 1.9 million right now. The ADV right around 3.2 million. Small caps looking surprisingly light by comparison. 680, that's not bad. That's respectable. That's roughly halfway to its ADV of about almost 1.3 million. But it's not blowing the doors off the way everything else is, including the Qs. 2.25 million already, so looking pretty good out there in Q land as well. The ADV about 3.75, so we know how the Qs operate. They do have a banger morning, then the second half of the session, kind of a lazy day from a volume perspective, but we'll see how things roll out there today. Let's get out to the single names. Now, you might be forgiven for expecting it's a banger day in the indexes. It's going to be a banger day in the single names as well, and the answer is kinda. It's certainly respectable. It's not 150,000 contracts a day. It's already not 350 either. It's somewhere in between that, listeners, which gets us to SoFi. Number 9, SoFi, number 10, I should say, SoFi. 278,000 contracts. SoFi had an intriguing week. Not exactly the best week. Trading about 7 1/3 today right now, off a little bit today. But over the past week, they've come for it. It was trading a little over $9 on our last show on Monday. It's down to about 7 1/3 now, so obviously not looking great. Looks like the low for the week was about 716 or so, so they're right near the lows. They really came for it right after our show on Monday, pretty much, in the after hours. They started just crushing it. So not looking great out there for SoFi, but looking decent from a volume perspective, 278,000. Number 9, Rivian. I saw another Rivian in the wild in Chicago again the other day. Just parked on the side of the road, nice little Rivian pickup. You know, you hear all these stories about, you know, they're going the way of the dodo sooner rather than later, but I anecdotally did see one. Now, that's one versus the 8 million Teslas I see a day, so compare and contrast there. But they do exist. They are out in the wild. I have seen a few Fiskars floating around, too, which are even rarer. But 12 even right now, up nearly a full buck. So maybe looking pretty parabolic as of the last few minutes out there in Rivian as well. So looks like they have a key EV model launch coming up. Either way, they got a buy rating. Some brave analyst diving into the fray with a buy rating for Rivian. Well, there you go. More buyers than sellers, kid. It's up nearly a buck out there today. So popping hard out there in Rivian land. Good for number 9, 306,000 contracts. Number 8, we're going back in time to my old stomping grounds of Intel. $46 and about a dime, up about $1.50 right now. Good for 310,000 contracts. Maybe all this chip love will make Intel, dare I say it, sexy again. We have speculated in the past. Is it 1999 all over again? Look at some of these names we're talking about. Microsoft, Intel. Maybe that is the case. I mean, NVIDIA's been hanging around forever. So this is like the 3rd or 4th run for them. This one might seem to have some legs to it, though. And number 8, Intel, 310. Number 9, what the FLOWMASTER was just talking about here, our buddies out there in good old New York Community Bank Corp, a.k.a. NYCB listeners, trading 3 3/4 right now, but that doesn't tell the whole story. They sold off to $1 3/4 just yesterday. So this is quite a literal buy the dip scenario. If you bought that dip, they went from a little over $3 down to $1 3/4 and right back up today to 3 3/4. So if you bought it yesterday, you're already up $2 on this $3 3/4 stock. So there are definitely worse. I fully expect the FLOWMASTER to tell us he scooped that dip, but we'll find out in a little bit. Either way, worth 314,000 contracts and the number 7 spot today. Keeping it in the chips from Intel to AMD. 211 1/3, up about $0.75 today. AMD, number 6, 508,000 contracts on the tape. Number 5, let's move out to the land of the metaverse, shall we? It is Meta, a.k.a. the artist formerly known as Facebook. 513 and about a dime, up nearly $17 today, or almost 3.5%. This is still, this level in Facebook is, or Meta, just bonkers to me. I still think of it as the name that was struggling sub 100 not too long ago. Over 5x that now. I mean, that's just crazy town. A number 5, Meta. Number 4, our old friend Palantir. Are they having a decent day? The answer is yes. 26.90, up about $0.75 today, or nearly 3%. Good for number 4 today. 595,000 contracts. Let's just look really quickly and see what people are up to out in Palantir. What's driving all that flow? More than VIX right now. I'm gonna guess, go out on a limb and say it's probably some upside calls. Oh yeah, that's the case. It's the 27 calls expiring tomorrow, going up 40,000 times, followed by 36,000 of the 27 halves, also expiring tomorrow. So, yeah, spoiler alert, those are looking pretty good. Actually, looks like earlier this morning, we hit 27 and a half. So the 27 halves were at the money as of a little while ago. And then if that's not enough, 25,000 of the 27s expiring next week. So there you go. You're talking about 100,000 contracts just in those 3. All upside, a lot of it expiring tomorrow. So what a surprise. A lot of near-dated upside going up in Palantir. Will it pay off? I don't know. Maybe we'll have to tune into options oddities tomorrow, see if we can pay some of that off. Number 3, as I said, number 3, climbing the ranks yet again. It is Apple, back to its old slot. 699,000 contracts. Apple actually popping $0.50 today, trading 169 and about 2/3. They've been in a malaise post car cancellation, kind of trying to find their way again, taking all these people, just turning them from a car project overnight to an AI thing. Sounds like kind of a little bit of Me Too stuff. People are wondering what's next for Apple. Well, stock meandering up today. That's good for nearly 700,000 contracts. Number 2, you know what it is, listeners. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you expect it to be number 1 because it's Tesla. 1.31 million contracts, 179 and a quarter, up about $2 3/4. So it looks like they like it again today after coming for it over the last few sessions. 1.31 million for the number 2 spot. I mean, Tesla's number 2. What could possibly be number 1, listeners? What could possibly do it? You know what it is. Maybe you love it. Maybe you hate it. It's NVIDIA. My goodness, we were just joking about NVIDIA. Seemed like it was just at 730 a few sessions ago. We were just joking not too long about it. It's probably going to make it to 1,000. It's at 919 right now, listeners. Up 3.62% or 32 handles. 1.46 million. It is probably going to hit 1,000. Could hit it today. My goodness. This rampage. This is something else. Listen, so you hear all the comparisons, the tulip bubble, the .com bubble. Is it a bubble? I don't know. This is pretty impressive movement, to say the least, out here. Good to see some of the board members are cashing in on this ridiculous rally. Some of them selling as of 11 minutes ago. The report's hitting the tape. Not hurting the stock, though. Folks still loving it. Let's go out to the earnings this week. We had NEO on Tuesday. We had everyone's favorite, Ross Dress for Less, on Tuesday as well. Nordstrom Wednesday, Foot Locker and Victoria's Secret today. We have Kroger and Big Lots and Burlington and Costco. A lot of names still popping off. He also had Target on Tuesday as well. So a lot popping off out there. In terms of reports for you folks, hot off the presses because we like you folks. Let's go out first to everyone's favorite. I know the Rock Lobster's favorite. I'm not sure they have it on the shores of Maine. This is Victoria's Secret, ticker symbol VSCO, VSCO. The least sexy ticker for a quote-unquote sexy name out there. 25 and 2/3 is where it was trading going into its announcement. And, oh my goodness, they are coming for this. Apparently, not the sexiest name anymore, listeners. They're pricing in a little bit shy of 10%, 9.7%. They had delivered, when we ran these numbers this morning, 26.7%. And now they've delivered over 30, nearly 31%. The stock has fallen, listeners, from nearly $26 to 17 3/4 right now. So yeah, spoiler alert. Oh my goodness, this is the worst day since their IPO in 2021. Wow. Soft sales outlook. Yeah, you think? Subdued apparel demand. Yeah, you think? Wow. They are coming for it. Very little sex appeal left, apparently, in VSCO, as we're going to call it from now on. Speaking of sexy clothes, Burlington. It doesn't get any sexier than that. Today, before the bell, BURL is the ticker. They were going into their announcement 205.86. So they were looking pretty frothy out there, pretty lofty from a price perspective. Coming into it, also pricing in nearly 10%. Underperforming on the vol front, delivering 7.4%, but popping hard out there today. They were at 221 at one point, so they were moving. So apparently, Everyone's selling Victoria's Secret and buying Burlington today because they're still up nearly 13 handles right now, or 6.25%. So, man, interesting pairs trade. Anyone have that on? Victoria's Secret and Burlington, formerly Burlington Coat Factory. Apparently, that's not sexy enough. Now they're just Burlington stores. Either way, popping hard out there today. If you want to see what else we have on tap for you, all the other names coming up, Dick's Sporting Goods, I should say, Dollar General, Mr. Uncle Mike's favorite name out there, a whole bunch of names for you folks to sink your teeth into. Only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab. If you click on that, you'll see the season hanging out at a fairly frothy 129%. Man, this is a banger cycle out here. This is definitely the juiciest we've seen in quite some time. Certainly this late in the cycle. Sometimes the cycle starts this hot and then it tapers off. It's only getting hotter right now, which is crazy. 838 names reporting 129%. That is nothing to sneeze at, listeners. Our long-term average, that already was pretty frothy at 104%. Compare that to the depths of the pandemic when we were in the high 70s, low 80%. So it's already up around 20-odd%, and now past it to 129%. That's some impressive numbers out there, listeners. But let's see if what the FLOWMASTER has in store for us is equally impressive. It is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time to get weird. It is time to get wild. It is time for everyone's favorite portion of the show. Maybe it's not. Maybe you like the strategy block. Maybe you like the mail block. To each their own. But let's get out to a little bit of weird and wild and unusual activity, shall we? Let's get out to a name we have not talked about, I don't think, ever on this show. We talked about CMGI before. Old school name, but had not talked about CMI, aka Cummins Inc. This is a manufacturer and designer of filtration and power generation products. Ticker symbol CMI, trading 265.80, off about 760 or nearly 3% today. On the year, it's been an interesting story. They kicked off the year 256, so they're up slightly on the year, almost $10. They got as low as 203. Looks like that was back in May, and then as high as about 276, and that looks like just a few sessions ago. So they're kind of hanging out near the highs for the year. But Mr. FLOWMASTER, sounds like that's not all. Sounds like they've got a little bit of a corporate action here, spinning off their interest in everyone's other favorite name, ATMU. You know, we love a good, sexy tender offer out here. This came across your radar today, sir. What's catching your eye in this CMI ATMU tender, sir?
So this, if you look at it in terms of odd blocks, I guess, or unusual flow, at the high level, both of these symbols, Cummins and ATMU, are trading 3 or 4 times their option volume today. And if you dig into it, you'll see that this is all in the form of RevCon spreads, which option traders know is effectively just stock against a synthetic, really simply a basis trade, or sometimes people use it to control the hard to borrow cost on a stock. And so what's going on in Cummins is they're splitting off, they're divesting of the remaining portion of ATMU, which is a filtration company. Cummins makes truck engines and diesel engines. And the tender involves basically any shareholder can turn in shares of CMI, and Cummins will process the tender and give back shares of ATMU. And to get people to do this, they actually give a discount on the ATMU. And this is very common. We've seen it in a handful of other stocks in the last year or so. And the discount in this case is 7%. And so what that really means is if you put $1,000 worth of CMI stock and you tender it, you get back $1,070 worth of ATMU. Now, there's moving parts to this, right? The ATMU can move when you get it. But what's interesting about this this case is that there's something called an odd lot preference. So the RevCons are being done by these big institutional risk arb traders, where they'll basically use a RevCon to buy a whole bunch of stock, and the RevCon, the option part of that offsets the risk. So they're buying the stock, but they don't actually have any exposure to it. And then they tender the shares, and then they get back this other stock at a discount, and then they sell that and try to keep the discount. It's simply an arbitrage attempt to get the 7% of the CMI stock price. So the 99 share odd lot preference is one of the terms of the tender is any positions that are tendered that are below 100 shares go to the front of the line. They actually get a full exchange for about 12 and a half shares of ATMU. And 99 shares of CMI is about $27,000. So 7% of that is about $1,800. So what this means is that even small accounts or relatively small accounts can buy the CMI. You can only buy 99 shares. You're not allowed to own more than 99 to do this. You have your broker tender the shares. The deadline is Monday, but some brokers have a deadline tomorrow, so they have time to get the instructions in. And then you're going to end up with ATMU. Now, I've actually done this trade, and I have a bunch of friends that have done this trade. You can still do it today, depending on your broker. I know for a fact that Fidelity and E-Trade, it's both doable today because the stock has to be settled for it to tender, and it'll settle on Monday, and you can still get the tender in before the deadline. But every broker is a little different. You got to be careful about that. But what happened? But the flip side of this is you want to use some sort of a hedge on the ATMU side. So basically, you're going to get the stock. It takes about a week or two to hit your account, and you don't really want to have just kind of this naked exposure to the stock price, especially because other people are doing the same thing, and the stock might actually get under some pressure next week. So basically, you use some options to either sell a combo, or you buy a deep put, or you trade a collar, and it's all very tradable. The only kind of hair on the whole thing is the timing, because the averaging period has started for the stocks. So you're going to have to put on the hedge today, maybe tomorrow, and things can wiggle around a little bit. And then once you do get the ATMU stock, you're going to want to get out of the hedge. One way you could do that is if you can get a deep put and not have to pay much of a bid offer to get it, so maybe bid mid-market or bid parity, then you can just exercise the put and be out of the stock. So that was my kind of interesting tidbit for today.
Very interesting. If you have questions about all those moving parts, listeners, hit him up over there, the FLOWMASTer at the CBOE. He'll walk you through it all. Mr. Rock Lobster, you've traded an ARB or two in your day. Have you noticed this one and have any thoughts, sir?
I have to say, you should just take that little blurb by Henry and section it off and just auction it off as how to tender stock properly.
I was going to say, that was pretty informative. If you missed it,
was
or
very,
didn't get any pieces.
Henry did a great job.
I had the same thought. Yes. Maybe we'll make a clip.
I would just bucket Henry's whole thing there and say, okay, all you scallywags, if you want to see how to tender properly, listen to the FLOWMASTer do his thing. That's why they call him the FLOWMASTer. They don't call him the No Master. They call him the FLOWMASTer. There you go.
They do call him
Nothing
that.
Nothing to add. That was well done.
Or perhaps I call him that. But, to each their own.
That's true. Yeah, yes.
They call me the benevolent dictator for a reason. Once I come up with a name, it tends to stick. But, interesting stuff out there, listen. Again, if you missed any of that, rewind it, listen to it. It may be too late by the time you listen to it to do this one, but it may also help arm you for these come across our tape all the time. And as you mentioned, we don't always talk about them because it's a lot of institutional ARB flow, which isn't always the sexiest or even the most accessible for a lot of the retail listeners out there. But it's informative sometimes to break this all down. Aside from that, Mr. FLOWMASTer, you got some other fun stuff up your sleeve out there today. Looks like including some 10-minute delta bursts out here. What is all this data you're throwing at me today, sir?
Well, so Mark, I know you like to see, the sneak preview on some of the stuff that I'm working on. And this one is, so it's not a specific trade, but in the way that we're processing trades at Trade Alert and CBOE is we're able to put accurate Greeks on all the trades using the CBOE Analytics suite. And so all we're doing in this little visualization, which you can tweet out if you want, is simply taking all of the flow in every stock and summing up the delta on the day and then also in the last 10 minutes as things are moving. And so, you were talking about Rivian, right? And you looked at the flow in Trade Alert, and you can see it's all call buyers, or like overwhelmingly call buyers, right? So that's bullish. Everybody just kind of knows call buying is bullish, but you can quantify it and say, okay, fine. If we took the delta of every call bought and summed it all together and accounted for some of the murky stuff, mid-market trades and spreads, and there's a little bit of nuance to how you do it. But basically what you see is that on the day, there's a certain amount of Rivian stock to buy, and in fact, it's almost 12% of the average daily stock volume in the name, and that's kind of where things get significant, because in the olden days when you and I were on the floor, you'd sell some calls and you'd buy the stock as a hedge, and if it was 1,100 shares of Delta, you'd literally buy 1,100 shares of stock. It's not that simple anymore, because the market making community is more sophisticated. They're trading a lot of things against other things. But for Rivian, which trades 50 million shares a day, to see that the net option delta is 6 million shares to buy, which is taking all those calls and translating them into the directional delta, that's pretty significant, and it is probably contributing to the fact that the stock's up 10%, right? It just kind of, and then as people see that, it starts to snowball a little bit. So we're going to see if we can get this data set to be more accessible to customers in a couple different forms. And it's just kind of neat. You can basically say, okay, right now, basically what is out there to buy versus to sell. Currently, we see, kind of net delta buying in Rivian, ATMU, and Netflix, and Meta, kind of some of the popular ones. And then you've got sellers in GE, Riley, which is a financial name that's been kind of whipping all over the place. And I see Gap Stores, GPS, is on the sell list. About 6% of its daily volume. They have earnings tonight. So, you were talking about Burlington and Victoria's Secret. And, this is another kind of apparel name. So it'd be interesting. I think the straddle and Gap is implying a move of about 15%.
Mr. Flowmaster takes a week off and he comes back on swinging with a lot of fun data. I need to.
I had a lot of coffee today.
Apparently, I need to crunch all this myself. This is interesting stuff coming at you here. I'm hearing it just like you are for the first time, listeners. So it's all fascinating stuff. Since we're doing a deep dive into the Flowmaster, let's pay off one of his trades, shall we? That we talked about on the show a little over a month ago, back on February 1st. The Flowmaster came on talking about all this crazy paper going up in Rocket Lab, ticker symbol RKLB. At the time, the stock was selling off a little bit, about 70 cents. The volume was 10x what it normally is out there, and 53,000 contracts at the time. In particular, what caught your eye out there that day was a pretty decent-sized buyer, at least for this name, of the Feb 4 calls. Looks like they went up for about 25 cents, roughly 6,000 times. It's like the stock closed pretty much exactly $4 on February 1st. So it was right at the teeth of a little sell-off. And right after that, the stock started performing well. It got back up to nearly $5. Of course, that was right around expiration, $4.89. So they had to wait for it a little bit. And apparently this person you highlighted, Mr. Flowmaster, was not feeling very patient, because they got the heck out of Dodge on most of those calls the very next day, bailed on most of them for around 20 cents. So they lost a nickel. I guess they decided discretion, the better part of valor in that case. Like we said, if they were a little bit more patient, these would have actually worked out. That said, they didn't take all of them off. About 3,600 or so were still open on expiration. So it looks like they bailed on half of them, maybe rode half of them through expiration. So those ended up working out. Looks like they pretty much made a little bit of cash on these, even though they bailed early on some of them, Mr. Flowmaster. Is that your takeaway as well?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's been a really interesting market, right? I mean, in general, we've been up sharply, but there have been some little pockets, where we get some days that, 30, 40 handles in the futures. It does spook people and reminds people the markets can go down, but the overall picture has been, pretty solid. I think some of the crypto highs are feeding into this, this upside frenzy as well.
And speaking of frenzies, there's always a frenzy for the mail block, so let's get to it.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, everybody, let's get to it. It was a hot, fast, and furious week on the listener engagement front. Lots of questions for you folks out there to weigh in on. We had a silly one last week when it was just Uncle Mike and I last week on the Leap Day extravaganza. Oh, what a fun time we had. If you missed it, listeners, you know, when the FLOWMASTER and the Rock Lobster are away, myself and the uncleist of Mike's, we shall play. And we did indeed play last week. So check out our awesome, if I do say so myself, Uncle Mike Palooza on Leap Day. But in honor of Leap Day, we asked you last week, how do you use leaps in your options trading? I gave you three choices and the infamous other: stock substitution, income, long-term hedging, and you guys overwhelmingly chose stock substitution, 62.5%, roughly 12 to 13% for all the rest, so they're pretty much all tied. So stock sub, clearly, first and foremost in your heart of hearts when it comes to using long-term options. We also had some silly ones on options oddities last week. The Rock Lobster was away, so I had a bunch of fun with the options guy, and he was talking up a whole bunch of straddles. He was just talking up a whole mess of straddles. We were joking about the Jumia, easy for me to say, one of the Rock Lobster's favorite. It was popping all over the place, a $7 stock. The 1 week straddle was trading for $1, expiring tomorrow, listener. We said, hey, are you a buyer or seller at those levels? 80% of you folks said you wanted to buy that bad boy. Let's see where our old friend, if I could type correctly, there we go, our old friend Jumia is hanging out. Oh, 6 3/4. Sold off to roughly 6.5 earlier this week, then rallied back up to around 7, a little over 7. So if you were scalping the gamma, you did all right. If you're just trying to ride that straddle in one direction or the other, you're probably wearing it right now, but 80% of you wanted to buy it. Same deal for the Apple straddle. We talked about the 180 straddle expiring at the end of the month, trading a little bit shy of $8, 7 3/4. 60% of you wanted to buy that. 40% wanted to sell it. Lo and behold, on Monday, we come in with, gets hit with that huge EU fine, sells off nearly $6 in one day. So that straddle paid off pretty quickly. So that one worked out pretty well. And then, of course, our big question of the week last week was, what are you looking forward to, I should say, in terms of big market events post NVIDIA? And 61.3% of you chose the next CPI number, 25.8%. The next Fed meeting. Let's get out to our question of the week this week. Kind of coming back into an oldie but goodie. We want to get your sentiment on this one. Very simply, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary. Hard to believe, but 2-year anniversary of the onset of the zero DTE era. So we thought, coming up on it now. Very simple. Are you trading 0-day options? Heck yes, heck no, or not yet, but I'm curious. Excuse me. Mr. Uncle Mike, I would put you squarely in the not yet, but I'm curious camp, because why not? And then B, where do you think our audience is voting, sir?
I think the audience is trading them all. And in terms of where I'm at, I don't really see, with the exception of possibly for personal use, I don't really see myself trading them from the institutional side, just because of the fact that it's just not what we do. But on the personal side of it, I think they're fascinating, and I like watching them.
All right, we're coming up against it. We have to get to around the blocks. I'll just reveal the results now. It looks like some negative Nancy's sneaking in this morning anyway, because earlier this week, it was roughly 80-odd% saying heck yes. That has now dipped to exactly half, 50% of you saying heck yes, 31.3% saying heck no. So some of the negative folks starting to sneak in there, and not yet, but curious, 18.8%. So, of course, you add those two together, you're pretty much 50-50 with heck yes and borderline heck no if you add in the not yet folks out there. So our audience, once again, kind of split on the issue of the day. As we keep on rolling, it is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we do just that, tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next show on Monday. First off, Mr. Uncle Mike, glad to see you've recovered from your epic once every 4 years Leap Day Uncle Mike extravaganza. B, I know you've only had a week to plan. You still have the rest of the 4 years, but if you give us any hint, any glimpses, any insight into what you have planned for your next leap day extravaganza in approximately 4 years. We would appreciate it. And then B, if you have time, what are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week?
Well, in terms of the next leap day extravaganza, I mean, it's like the Olympics every 4 years. So, I mean, it's going to be exciting. And you just got to tune in and on February 29th, 2028, even if it's not on a Thursday or Monday. We'll see what actually happens with that. So in terms of what I'm watching, just seeing how the market reacts to our chairman giving his opinion or giving his thoughts on rates, seeing where we're at with that over the next few days. And then in terms of where we're at and the markets in and of itself, seeing if we can maybe touch 5,200 with the SPX, with where we're going with it. And also seeing how bonds react. Bonds have a lot to say about interest rates. And there's been times that we've even talked about on the show, if the Fed doesn't want to lower interest rates, sometimes the market just does it by itself with bond prices. So those are the things I'm watching.
I think Uncle Mike's hinting he's going to do a little bit of the skeleton sled for his next one, or maybe the luge. I don't know, whichever one he prefers. But that Olympics analogy, clearly he's going for one of those two, listeners. As we keep on rolling, let's go out to the land of the shores of Maine. Mr. Rock Lobster, our chat's getting behind you. They're saying, keep fighting the good fight, Mr. Rock Lobster. It will be warm soon in Maine. Don't give up now. So they're encouraging you to continue your furnace fight, sir. Does that give you the warm fuzzy?
It does. The listeners got my back. I feel a lot. It makes me feel happy. I feel very happy about that.
You can't get warm from your furnace. You can get warm reflexively through the reflected glow of the love of our audience, sir.
Yes.
So what's catching your eye for the rest of this week?
We are now 35 points from 5,200. So, heck, that's only at a 12 volatility. That's 1 day away. Just one day. So, if we don't hit it tomorrow, I will be surprised, because people are going to look at their 401ks, or they're going to look at their friends' 401ks today and go, I are a moron for not being invested in stocks. And that is how these things go higher and higher. So, again, if the market doesn't care about it, so anyway, and we basically have a vol-less rally. So VIX will never move again, and SPX will just keep going straight up. So until that changes, since Powell has said so, I think that's what we've got. Also, how high can tech go? And we're just going to wait for NVIDIA for 1,000, because literally I'm going to go to my pro class in 30 minutes, and we're going to price an NVIDIA 1,000 trade. So there you go.
I was just wondering about that myself. How much of those 1,000 calls going for? I guess we'll find out pretty soon. That music means we're coming up against it. So, Mr. Flowmaster, we're going to do a combo of what you're watching for Around the Block, as well as where can folks go to get, Mandy's newsletter or all the cool widgets you're cooking up over there, sir, at CBOE.
Sure. So for Mandy's newsletter, I put the link in the chat and then just lost it. Just Google CBOE Mandy Zhu. Her last name is XU. And I'll be watching some earnings. I'll be keeping an eye on some of this upside. This market is not quite parabolic, but in some spots it feels like it. So that's what I'll be watching for, kind of some of this very hot meme type of action.
Hot meme action. Another good potential title for the show out there. I think hot meme action. You think Uncle Mike, Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what's cooking in the land of St. Charles, and where can folks go to learn more?
Follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW, and follow me on LinkedIn too. There's going to be a lot of new material popping up in the near future, so come check it out.
Uncle Mike leading the vanguard on that hot meme action. Reach out to him if you want some more of that. And last but not least, he's all about the hot meme action. He's about to go price up the NVIDIA 1,000 calls. Doesn't get more memey than that. Mr. Rock Lobster, sir, where can folks go if they want to join you in this NVIDIA to 1,000 party?
Yes. You could go to optionpit.com, 888-TRADE-01. And any of my products, I'm having a lovely year, but it's a bull market, so it can't be that hard to trade options in a bull market. But still, we're doing okay. And if you want to learn how to protect these gains, check out my weekly profit cycles, where we do just that. learn how to get the market to pay for your protective options. So you can learn that right there in Weekly Profit Cycles.
I want you to price up for me NVIDIA near-dated 1,000 call, and then maybe a little bit longer term, let's say 7.5 put. Let's do that strangle. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. That's literally what I'm looking at.
See, do a show together for a decade, you start to think alike. Check it out for yourselves over there. Optionpit.com, the place to go. We got to get on out of here. Back again in a little bit. Chatting up all that fun flow in the land of CME with our friend Miss Carly Garner. Should be fun. I got a feeling she's coming on. Probably going to talk some energy and some nat gas. Where we go from there is anyone's guess. You got to tune in to TWIFO every week to find out. Then back again tomorrow to break down all the madness in the world of volatility. Who will be our special guest? Well, you got to tune in to Vol Views to find that out. And then after that, exclusively for our pro folks, we come back one final time for our broadcast week with a little bit of the old options oddities. If you want to check that out for yourselves, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Then I'll be traveling next week down to the big FIA Boca annual symposium down there. There will be a live OB on Monday. It'll be interesting to see what the mice get up to while the cat is away. I'm a little scared to find out, but I guess we'll all find out collectively on Monday. So see you then, another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by CBOE. CBOE's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of CBOE Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively CBOE. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the CBOE products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.